We're ready to go.
All right, we'll go ahead and call to order the August 24th, 2021 meeting of the Oregon City Historic Review Board. Our first item on the agenda, we'll ask for any public comments not related to items on the agenda this evening. All right, hearing none, we'll move into the public hearing portion of the agenda. There are 4 public hearings on land use applications scheduled tonight. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Members of the Historic Review Board are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, I will ask the Historic Review Board members whether they have any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any of the Historic Review Board members have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any member of the audience may question any Historic Review Board member about their disclosures. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. Quasi-Judicial hearing procedure that the Historic Review Board will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the Historic Review Board website and on the poster board behind Ms. Reed. Public testimony will be called on in the order it was requested in advance of the meeting. If you have not emailed city staff at planning@orcity.org to request to speak and would like to testify, please raise your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are any others in the audience who would like to participate. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is still open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence in testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Historic Review Board makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised on the record for the consideration of the City Commission or the Land Use Board of Appeals or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to the issue will not be deemed appealable to the City Commission or State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Okay, moving into the 4 public hearings tonight, we are going to rearrange the agenda just a little bit so that Ms. Richter can attend the appropriate items here. So we'll start with what's listed as item number 3, and we'll open the record for Oregon City file number GLUA 21-00042, HR 21-00018, revision to HR 1904 for a new single dwelling in the Canemah National Register District at 306 4th Avenue. I'll now ask each Historic Review Board member if they have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare, and if they visited the site and if they've noted any material information.
Chair Blythe. I think Carrie was going to handle the disclosures for this one, if you don't mind, and she might have a reminder for the board as well.
Sure. Okay. In that case, I can go ahead and hand it over to Ms. Richter to handle the disclosures.
Carrie, you're muted.
Sorry to interrupt your flow. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I can't see any of you, so I trust you can see me. And there's a delay, I think. So I'll just keep going and someone will interrupt me if it goes awry. I wanted to take a moment this evening before you get into the merits of any of these appeals to offer a quick reminder about your role as Historic Review Board members. As I know you probably all know, you are public officials, and as public officials, you are subject to all of the rules and requirements of the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. And one of those requirements is that you cannot use your title as a Historic Review Board member to your benefit or detriment. And that is both pecuniary, you know, you can't go drive an Oregon City Prius around and in order to transport your kids to school to save you on gas, but you also can't go around representing you are part of the HRB with respect to sort of the public at large. You have an obligation as part of being a public official to act as a public official during a public meeting, during your charge, but not to exercise any authority outside of that role. Historic Review Board members certainly have expertise in historic preservation, and they can be helpful, but they cannot police or otherwise enforce the guidelines against the public outside of the public hearing procedure. Does that make sense? So I wanted to just point that out because I don't think I have included that in my annual sort of briefing to new commissioner members, and I should, because it is something that is very important to the decorum of city officials. And it is also true that no HRB member can represent the Historic Review Board outside of a quorum. So they cannot bind the Historic Review Board with respect to anything outside of a public meeting where there's a quorum present and there is a vote taken. So that's another thing to keep in mind as you go forward for the next year till I come back and give this spiel again. And I hope I remember to include this in my PowerPoint presentation going forward because I think it's really important. I also want to talk a little bit more about the quasi-judicial procedure requirements for decision-making, which Chair Blythe mentioned, and he had started to poll you all, and I know you all have been polled before, so you understand conflicts of interest, bias, and ex parte contact. But I just want to remind you all one more time, conflicts of interest are situations where an application is filed to which you stand to benefit financially or a member of your family stands to benefit financially. So that one I think seems like a pretty obvious one, and of the three, it is the easiest. The second one is ex parte contacts, and ex parte contacts are not limited just to people coming up to you in the grocery store and telling you how you should vote on a particular application, but it includes all the facts that you might get or have that you received outside of the public meeting process. So things like the Historic Review Board has never done something one way or another. That kind of precedent idea is something that I'm sure many of you know, probably because of your involvement with Historic Review Board in the past. But that fact alone cannot be a determining factor, because every application comes to you with a certain application with that is specific to a particular piece of property that carries with it certain design elements. And each case is anew. The design guidelines apply differently in each case. And so I want you to keep in mind not to use facts, whether somebody told them to you in the grocery store, whether you read them in the newspaper, whether you did a site visit and you saw something, whether you've just known about a property because you saw it for sale, any sort of fact that you have that you've gotten outside of the public hearing process needs to be disclosed as part of the ex parte disclosures part of the hearing. Finally, bias. Every applicant has a right to have their application reviewed pursuant to an impartial tribunal. That means a decision maker that can review an application based on the facts set forth in the application against the applicable approval standard. And, for good or for bad, all of you are experts in historic preservation, and that pool of historic preservationists is not that big. So it's quite likely that you will have had an opportunity to be engaged on one property or another, in one neighborhood or another, but you need to be able to take off your advocacy hat or your particular involvement with a particular application hat and review an application as an unbiased decision maker. And if you can't, then we need to have you step down and the HRB will make a decision without you. So those are the things I wanted to cover. I appreciate the time. I can't see any of your faces, so you're probably all asleep. But I would ask you to now, if any commissioner has any ex parte conflict of interest or bias to declare with respect to 306 4th Avenue. Commissioner Edgar.
Yes, at one time in 2005, approximately, I owned the property and sold it up to a developer who subsequently resold it multiple times, where it was sold multiple times. I have talked to people before I ever was involved under the HRB, but only minor things as somebody walking in the neighborhood and never in a capacity with any connection to the HRB. And I'm fully prepared to be objective on any decision, and I do not see any conflict.
Commissioner Edgar, I have a couple of follow-up questions. The Historic Review Board made a decision to approve a house on this property in 2019. Did you participate in that proceeding, not as an HRB member, but as a participant?
I may have made some statements at that time, but I never had any further contact or anything like with a client other than just maybe being in the neighborhood, but no discussion on anything really of any pertinence.
Okay, but so you don't remember if you testified it would have been the fall of 2019 on the initial application for a home on this property?
The context of anything that was said was probably part of the record, but but at this point, I don't remember anything in particular that was said other than I understand I had once owned the property and I understood everything about the property because I have owned adjoining property.
Okay. Have you had any conversations with the participants or others with respect to this application? This application was filed in mid-July of 2021.
No.
And you said this, but I want to make sure it's on the record that you can make a decision based solely on the facts set forth in this application, not the one in 2019, on this application based on the standards and guidelines that are in place today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anybody else have any disclosures?
I have no disclosures. Or, I mean, I have nothing to disclose.
I have no disclosures.
And I have no disclosures.
Anybody visit the site?
I've been to the site multiple times, but only as someone driving by. I haven't been there since reading this application.
I visited the site, but don't have any notable information to add.
I visited the site and just can see it from my front yard.
I have visited the site and nothing notable to add.
Does anybody in the audience wish to question these commissioners about these disclosures?
All right, if you could please come up to the microphone, state your name and city of residence.
My name is Linda Basinger, and I live in Canemah. I've lived in Canemah for over 20 years. Paul Edgar has bias towards this property and any other. The other properties that have been brought before the HRB in the past, Paul Edgar has always objected to it. Paul Edgar sold this property and made money from it, then deemed it unbuildable. I strongly object to Paul Edgar on the basis of prior bias as being part of this HRB hearing on this property tonight. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm not hearing anybody. Commissioner Edgar or HRB board member Edgar, I just want to reaffirm the statements that you made that you have no financial interest in the outcome of the HRB's decision on this application, and that you are going to review the application based on the application before you against the approval criteria.
Yes, absolutely yes.
You may proceed with the staff report. Thank you for letting me interrupt.
Thanks, Ms. Richter.
Are you all ready for my staff report?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Jacob, do you mind bringing up HR 2118? Thank you. This is an application for a revision to a previously approved single-family home in the Canemah National Register District, HR 1904. My staff report tonight, you can change the slide. Actually, I have the remote, don't I? Let me just try this out. Which way do I need to point it? It's Turned on. That worked, kind of. Okay. Okay. You can go back. Can you go back to the second slide, please? So I'm going to give you an overview of the project today, but the staff report does recommend a continuance. We are awaiting some revised grading plans, and we have some of the revisions in already that were turned in just about the same day that the agenda went out. So the staff report does not reflect any of the revised drawings, but I will show some of them to you today, and know that we are expecting more from the applicant after this hearing and before the September meeting, which is why the continuance is on the table. There might be some outstanding design issues even with the revised plans, and so I'm going to discuss those and then ask for HRB direction on those design issues, and ask you what other information you might want from the applicant for the next meeting in order to be able to make a decision. And then because the applicant has asked us to review these revised materials, we are going to need an extension to the 120-day decision deadline. The meeting in September is 35 days away, so we ask for a 35-day extension. That would put the 120-day deadline at December 31st, 2021. So the applicant can give us that extension as part of the applicant's presentation tonight, that will work. So with that, I'm going to keep going. So you're controlling it? Okay, thank you, Jacob. So this property is at the corner of 4th Avenue and Monroe Street in the Canemah National Register District. It is 10,000 square feet, 100 by 100, made up of two lots of record. Next slide, please. The topography here is quite steep. It's in the Geologic Hazard Overlay District and the Willamette River Greenway Overlay District. And the applicant has held meetings with the city regarding geologic hazard, but has not yet submitted an application. My understanding is that the applicant is starting with the HRB review and hoping to get the footprint and the design approved before submitting the formal geologic hazard review. Next slide, please. So 4th Avenue in this location has a rock retaining wall. The property has a lot of mature trees, and there's an existing gravel driveway on the property, potentially from a previous house that has been long demolished, but we don't really have any information about that. Go ahead, next slide, please, thanks. And another, next one. So in 2019, the proposed design was approved as bungalow style with the front of the house facing 4th Avenue. Because of the topography, the garage was proposed to be a tuck-under garage. Typically in Canemah, we see detached garages to meet the guidelines, but the overall grading and disturbance and topography of the lot resulted in an approval of this attached garage on the side of the house, facing the unimproved Monroe Street right-of-way. So this is, I think, to answer one of the public comments that was received, this bungalow style is also sometimes referred to as craftsman bungalow. The style was approved. It is one of the approved styles in the guidelines. Next slide, please. So you can see the site plan there in 2019 with the house facing 4th Avenue. So the applicant went back after this approval and did some work with his consultants, his geotech engineer and civil engineer, and his narrative explained that when the additional work was done here, it was found that the amount of retaining walls and regrading of the lot that would be required for this plan to work was not going to meet the city's geologic hazard code and would result in some really massive retaining walls that would probably not be approved by the Historic Review Board either. In 2019, the anticipation was to have one retaining wall at the back of the driveway and then one behind the house, but that turned out to not have been accurate. That was an assumption made at the time. To try to solve the problems here, the applicant has proposed to turn the house 90 degrees and face it towards Monroe Street with the side of the house facing 4th Avenue. So what this does is reduces the amount of grading required and reduces the number and height of retaining walls. So he's attempting to better meet the design guidelines and meet the city's geologic overlay, hazard overlay standards. You can go to the next one, please. So here's the revised site plan with the house turned 90 degrees. You can see that the property lines are very far removed from the 4th Avenue right-of-way. There's about 23 feet of distance between the rock wall along 4th Avenue and the property line. So here's kind of the difference. You can see in 2019 version with the house facing 4th and now the 2021 version with the house facing sideways from 4th. And here are the renderings comparisons. So the implications of this change are that there are 3 retaining walls total, 2 5 feet tall and 1 4 feet tall on the back side of the driveway. Rotating the house 90 degrees, keeping the garage the same, means that the garage is now on the front elevation of the home. There's also a reduction in the setback from 4th Avenue to 10 feet. So there's that 23 feet distance from the street pavement and then another 10 feet from the property line. And then there's some changes to the front porch stair because the front porch is now sideways and this stair configuration has to change because the driveway is directly underneath the home. So there's the site measurements, and I'm happy to go back to any of these slides if you need those at any time. Showing the pink line there is the edge of the pavement on 4th. And so you can see 23 feet and then another about 10-foot setback. The elevation change for the street level up to where the house would be placed is about 22 feet. But I think we'll talk more about that. So the effect of this change, as you can see, which is described in the written staff report and recommendation, is that there's quite a bit of massing along 4th Avenue. Because the house has a tuck under garage and a ground floor level, there's about a 10-foot mass there of that lower level wall. So the guideline is that for massing is to maintain historic residential massing, and not allowed is long uninterrupted wall planes facing the public way. The garage on the front elevation, that's shown here. Now, that is facing away from 4th, so it's not going to be prominently visible from the right-of-way. That might factor into the board's decision. The guidelines are that the new garages should be located alongside or behind the house. Where topography is a concern, locate the garage offset from the building primary facade. And typically, like I said before, accessory structures, including garages, are detached. The board did already approve a garage on this house to be on the ground level. However, now it's on the front. Here's a rendering that shows the retaining walls. You can see the three, and try to shine the light here. I guess that doesn't really work on the screen. You can see those three retaining walls to the left of the house. The guidelines for retaining walls are to minimize the height and presence of walls. Wow, that's small. Sorry about that. So there's also some grading guidelines that talk about that says that extensive regrading of a lot is not allowed. So the applicant has actually turned in some revised materials that change the grading and lower the house. So this is the new rendering that was just submitted just a week ago. So you can see that lower level is greatly reduced, which has which is a much better massing situation than the previous drawing. You can see that 10-foot lower level is reduced to less than 5 feet now. We don't have the full revised grading plan, however, so some of these details that go with this revised plan we're still awaiting those. The implications of this revised grading plan are that the massing along 4th Avenue is reduced. We do need to make revised findings based on this. The findings in the staff report are based on the other plan that has the 10-foot wall. And the applicant is now working to ensure that the revised grading will meet the geologic hazard code. I think what we don't know yet is if there are any changes to the retaining walls that will result from this change, or any changes to the front porch stair. So some other design issues or ideas that I think that I provided in the staff report and that the board might want to weigh in on tonight to give the applicant some guidance are that, even though the massing has been reduced, there is still a very long wall along 4th Avenue, 56 feet in length there, from the front of the front porch to the back of the house. And the front porch is 8 feet deep. So a few things that could be done to help reduce the massing further are a reduction in the overall length of the house to keep it closer to or less than 50 feet. A reduction in the ground floor ceiling height would reduce the wall height along 4th Avenue, so that if the garage ceiling were lower, I think it's about 10 feet. If it were maybe 8 feet in the lower level, that could help. And then reducing the depth of the front porch from 8.5 feet to 6 feet, or some other lower reduced depth. A few other issues that I want to point out. The rear porch, it has kind of a bit of mass to it as well. And now it's right up along the street instead of being hidden behind the house. So one strategy could be to move that rear porch back from the building edge, so it's not flush with the 4th Avenue facade. You could reduce the size of that covered rear porch in addition to or instead of moving it. And the dormer, that was previously kind of behind the house and hidden is now quite prominent and has a bit of mass, and so that could potentially be reduced in size slightly. There might be implications to this on the floor plan, and so the applicant might have some comments to make about that, but totally understood. And I also want to point out that there are a lot of trees in the 4th Avenue right-of-way in between the street and this proposed structure. There might be, a lot of this might not end up being visible, but we don't have the information in the application that shows us which of those trees are healthy and going to be preserved. I think that if there are a lot of mature trees that are going to be right there in the way of the view of this porch and this dormer, and that side of the house, that, you know, maybe some of these changes are not necessary. But I don't think we have the information to know, you know, what it's really what the result will be. So I recommend that we get some sort of documentation or photo pointing out which trees will be retained and preserved throughout the construction process. So looking for HRB direction for the next hearing, is there any other additional information that you would want other than the revised elevations, a revised grading plan, and potentially that tree plan? Are there any design changes you'd like to see in the plans? You can condition changes that were discussed, but you also might want to see what that would look like before you decide on that. So if you have any comments or direction on that, that would be helpful. And then if you have any other outstanding issues that you've observed, now's a great time to let us know. And any questions?
Thanks, Kelly. Any questions from other board members?
I'm wondering how close that back porch is to the next lot, and if that might become a privacy issue at some point, because if somebody decides to build on that lot, having somebody's back porch right.
There is an application for a home on that lot that was approved last year by the board. I'm not sure what happened to the screen, but I can pull up the site plan on mine to see if we've got the setback there. The setback on the 2021 site plan is not labeled, and I'm not sure if the porch is even shown on that.
Kelly, which slide is it that you're looking at?
It would be slide number 9. Thanks. So I don't think the porch is even shown. I think the back red line there is actually just the back of the house, meaning that porch would probably be almost on the property line, I'm guessing, which wouldn't meet the required setbacks for the R6 zone. So that may be an issue and might require that the porch be eliminated entirely. I think we need more information on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul. I do know a little bit of history on the property because this lot was once had the first federal judge of the Oregon Territory had his house there, and the lot was sold in approximately 1850, 12 years before it was platted, or the global area was platted. So this lot was sold without an alleyway in its historical cell. So there are alleyways there at the back between those two lots on 4th Avenue that some legal person, maybe even our attorney here, could talk to, but the property was sold without any alleyway easement historically. And and it probably should disappear through there. But that's a choice that could be made by this applicant if they wanted to go back there. But there is a cutout where the foundation was of the old judge's house that is right about very close to the to what would be the alleyway. So that is probably one of the lowest places on the lot. And so back in that, we'll say the uphill side or lower part on 4th Avenue, going up the hill right there. But the rock wall, for the point of record, according to our documents on history of Canemah, holds rock from the ballast of ships that were originally built in Canemah. And so that's a very, very historic rock wall right there that goes along 4th Avenue. I think that the proposed changes being proposed by the applicant do reflect bringing down the height of the house significantly. And I think that the porch should be, the back porch should be probably centered a little bit more off of the face of that facing 4th Avenue, as well as the dorm, the shed dormer on the 3rd floor. If it could be set back a little bit from the edge, it would not, makes it look so massive. Yet from foundation up, this is a 4,300 square foot proposed structure that has a 2-car garage underneath it. That's part of that, but it's 4,300 square feet, which exceeds a lot of the houses historically in compatibility. So when anything that can reduce the image of that house looking that big is a positive step. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Any other questions from any other board members before we take the applicant's testimony? Okay, just a little reminder on process. The applicant will have up to 15 minutes to present their application, and then any public testimony from representatives of recognized neighborhood associations, government agencies, or other public interest organizations will have 5 minutes. Individuals will have 3 minutes, and then the applicant will have up to 5 minutes for a rebuttal. So we'll go ahead and invite the applicant up. If you can state your name and city of residence, please. I think you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hey, thank you. My name is Tim Ahaus. I'm the owner with my wife at 306 4th Avenue. I am not a terribly formal person, so I'm not exactly sure how all this should go. Do I just address your concerns or what Kelly had mentioned, or how do you want me to start this?
Well, I guess it's up to you what information you'd like to present. I think, of interest to us would obviously be the, justifications for why you had to make the changes.
Yep.
And then particularly anything you can address to the items that wouldn't meet the standard design guidelines, including the garage on the front and attached and those types of things.
Okay. So Kelly did a great job with her summary. After we got approval from the HRB originally for our design, we took it through our civil engineer who started doing the grading plan. And the grading plan, he finished and he gave it to me. And I talked with Josh Wheeler at the city about it. And he said there was no way that the current, our previous design was going to meet the city code standards. We had 4 6-foot tall retaining walls. Two of them ran 70 feet behind the house even. And then we had about 62% grading for the total lot. The city requirements were 15 feet total cuts and 40% or less overall grading. So that was not going to work in any shape or form. So we went back to our civil engineer to discuss the options that we had. We talked about maybe coming off of 5th, because Ganong goes up to 5th. It's unimproved, but goes up to 5th. About putting the house closer to 5th Avenue and coming down off of 5th to it. He said it alleviates some issues, but it creates other issues. We talked about how we could possibly detach the garage in a manner, and he said detaching the garage would probably give you more massing, and then it would give you more grading as well, and would probably have more retaining walls behind it. So that wasn't an option. And honestly, until we talked with Josh again, we talked to Josh, Kelly, and Tim Pfeiffer, and then it was an informal meeting that was on Zoom for about an hour. And we went through the different possibilities that we could have to build on this lot and what would make sense. And Josh said the best way to build on it to meet the city code requirements is if the house was wide. Well, it can't be wide if it's a traditional home and facing forth. So we just thought outside the box to say, what if we rotated it 9 degrees so it faced unimproved Ganong, made it longer and not as deep. So having it not as deep doesn't cut into the hillside. If you guys have seen the hillside, I know Mr. Edgar sees it every day, but it is a very challenging lot. It's extremely steep. It's between 25 and 35% grade. When you do the setbacks off of the right-of-ways, there's a very tight area that you can build in. So by making it wider or face Ganong, we don't have as many cuts, so we don't have as many retaining walls. We're able to get the 4 retaining walls at 6 feet down to 3 retaining walls, 5 feet plus 4 feet. So 14 total feet of cuts. And the grading, overall grading, went from about 63% to right about 40%, 40%. So we're able to meet the city code requirements. So I realize this is kind of a double-edged sword. We have to get approval from the HRB. And if it doesn't work for you guys, then we can't move forward. If it doesn't work for the city, we can't go forward. So we're always trying to balance these two things here. So that's why we have decided to rotate the house and see what we can do with it to get approval from the HRB on this. The retaining wall, since we're talking about it, the last conversation I had with our civil engineer, he suggested dropping the home. So I think the top of slab, he wants to do at 192. The elevation about the same area of where that 4th Avenue wall, that north wall is going to be, is about 196 and a half. So it would be dropped 4.5 feet below grade. Okay, so what that does is the retaining wall that's on the opposite side of our home is probably going to be, the width of the home is 38 feet. We've got 10-foot setback, another 20 feet for the right-of-way. So we're probably looking at 65 feet probably before you get to the retaining wall. If you're standing in the middle of the street with about 174 feet elevation, you will not see the first retaining wall. The second retaining wall, the top of it, is going to be about it's going to be about the same height as the first main level. So chances are you might see the top 1-2 feet of that, and then you would see that 4-foot third retaining wall up there. But because we're dropping that home, which I'll get you more information for the next meeting, the first retaining wall you won't see, and the second one you probably will not see much of. So the retaining walls, you won't really have much of a view from the street level. The second thing about the garages on the front goes kind of in the same manner. The garages are going to be dropped lower as well, so it'll be 4.5 feet below grade. And what we've done, if you've seen the drawings, is Instead of having the garage bays at the very front of the patio, we've inset them to its front of the house. So they're in a kind of an alcove. And what we did by the staircase going up on the north side where 4th is at, we kind of made a solid corner, if you will. So you cannot see the garages from the line of sight from the street or from that edge on 4th that's blocking the garages. Are the garage bays on the front of the house? Yes, they are. Can you see them? No, probably not. As far as the massing goes, we are going to be dropping the house, so it is going to lower that overall height of the home. It's going to lower that one long wall that Kelly has mentioned about the basement. And if you want, we have no problem putting windows in that area to break it up, or any kind of other design element that you would see fit to make that look better so it's not just a straight flat wall. The rear patio, so in the grading plan that Kelly pulled up, this goes back to our original design. One of the things that we were trying to figure out in our original design was how can we make this home fit in the hillside. So we told our civil engineer, okay, move the front of the house as far as you can to the 4th Avenue, remove the rear patio altogether, and let's see if we can bring those retaining walls down. He brought down the height a little bit, but we still had 4 that were like 5 feet tall. So when he redid the grading plan, he took that same dimension of home that did not have the patio on it anymore to use that. We will have a 10-foot setback though for the rear patio now. Paul mentioned maybe centering that rear patio. We have no problem with that. We can move it to the other side, so you can't see it. There are a lot of trees in the right-of-way. I only saw one that may be dead. It has a bunch of ivy on it, so I assume that one's probably dead, but everything else looked pretty good. I was up there on Saturday with my wife, kind of clearing blackberry bushes. So it looked actually pretty good. On the lot itself, we're probably going to end up removing eight trees, probably. It could be 9 because we're getting close to a large tree with probably some cuts, but it's going to be probably 8. Previously, we were going to remove 11, possibly 12, again, getting close to the tree with the cuts. So we will be reducing trees. We'll be reducing the amount of trees we remove from this layout. Let's see, the rear dormer, I think Paul also addressed. The rear dormer, so one of the things that we did for the house is we rotated it 9 degrees, but then we also flipped it. So we flipped it so we have a bump out on one side, which is the south side now of the house. The rear south side of the home has a bump out towards the back, and that's where the living room is at. When we flipped it, it fit the topography much better, so there's no cuts into that hillside because it's kind of a bowl shape in the back of that area. So when we flipped it, that bump out is in this bowl shape, so we're not gonna have any cutouts back there. The dormer up top doesn't go all the way out over that. It stays in line. So if you see a rear elevation of one of the plans, yeah, so if you see this elevation, it's probably a little far for you guys, but the rear of the house doesn't go along with the bump out. The bump out is only that middle level. So changing that rear dormer would be pretty difficult to do because those rooms aren't that big upstairs. And if we made it any smaller, if we made it any lower, it might really have issues with those windows and egress. So obviously we can't do that because they're bedrooms. So. Let's see. I think Kelly mentioned the stairwell going up on the right-hand side now that would be encroaching into the setback. That was put there only because that is the only place we can put stairs. We can't put them in the middle going straight up. I wish we could. That looks much better for a home like this. I asked my architect about putting on the left. He said maybe, which he then followed up with, it would reduce the integrity of the retaining walls, however. So that's why we proposed to put it on the right-hand side as the only place we could put them. Any other questions for me, or did I fail to miss something?
No, I think that was helpful. And we'll go around the board here and ask if any of the board members have questions for you. We'll start with board member Stobie.
Not at the moment, but I may have some after listening to the other board members.
Board member Ferry.
Is the rock wall that you see along the road in the rendering, is that the rock wall that Paul's talking about? The same rock
In
wall?
actual rendering?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
You're keeping the rock wall?
No, we'll get rid of it.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
No, we're keeping that rock wall. I mean, that's, one thing that Paul did mention early on when we bought the property is he told us the story about the rock wall, and we think that's actually really cool. And,
yeah.
It was cleaned up the last time I was over there this weekend, but most time we've gone to the property is overgrown with blackberry bushes. I would love to have that thing cleaned up and have some kind of sign on it, so.
Okay. I guess the only other question I have is you had mentioned that now there will be a 10-foot setback from the back of the property to the rear porch?
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
so that would actually be, you would have a setback?
Yeah, I would set back with code requirements, and I'll get that information to you guys the next month when we have the grading plan finalized with all the setbacks.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
No other questions?
Board member Edgar.
I'll hold right now. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I do have a couple of questions for you. One of the I guess characteristics of the last design, we did include sort of pedestrian access up the front with sort of a path to the front door. I think one of our design guidelines is that we normally don't have garages on the front. I don't see an issue in general rotating the house to face the Ganong right away. I think the application that we approved in the adjacent lot is also rotated to face the hedges right of way rather than forth. So I think that aspect of it is fine, but I think one undesirable element of that is sort of I guess what I consider is maybe like the trick or treat test, right? Where if you do want to walk up to the house, if you have to walk up through the driveway access, then you have the garage and it's sort of looms above you. So I guess the question is, did you look at adding maybe a pathway up to that stairwell landing that comes from 4th Avenue that provides sort of a direct access from the right of way to the front door?
Well, we didn't, not that we can't. I didn't think we could really touch or alter that historic wall though. Can we move that wall then, or can we I thought that kind of wall, I don't know this for sure, but I kind of thought that historic wall was not to be touched. That was my understanding. So yeah, I mean, that would be fine actually. If you guys want that, we can make a pedestrian walkway from 4th with the approval from you guys that we can move that or move a section of that historic wall.
Okay. It's something we might want to consider. At least my initial thought is, the wall, in a general sense, obviously we want to stay probably, but it's in sort of the state that it's in right now. It needs a little bit of, cleaning up anyway, and it's really just loose stacked rock, so it's not in a very, permanent configuration. There's rocks that fall off of it and sort of thing, so it could potentially be slightly modified.
Okay, that's okay. I was just under the different understanding about kind of that was off limits. So.
Another question, I guess, and I think this is probably something that we'll want for approval, is if the footprint, so not the square footage of the total livable space, but the footprint of the house has changed. I recall in the previous application, we went through and compared the footprint relative to other homes that were in the district, and if there's any change to that.
No, we didn't change one thing from the original design, except for rotating it. We ended up having to keep the garage doors where they were at and rotated the house. So we didn't change any other size. It's still the same square footage, all three levels, same width, same depth.
Okay. That's helpful. And then another question is, if you maybe considered wrapping the porch around to also include part of the 4th Avenue side of the house. So rather than just being on the front of the house, maybe being, partially wrapped around that, now that the house is rotated, that side is definitely kind of the large, unbroken, massing of the house. And so whether that might give it a little bit of, one, break it up a little bit with the massing, but then also two, make the, the core or the side that faces 4th Avenue also not where the front door is, but also sort of more, the front to the right of way, if that makes sense, or sort of a secondary front.
So, let me understand. So, have the steps come up and then wrap on 4th and then go on the porch? Is that correct?
Well, the thought, I guess, would be that, so I'm looking at the side elevation here, and that potentially the porch could wrap around past either that first or maybe the first window there, without being very disruptive.
Oh, so you're saying like a side porch off that side?
Right, particularly if you were to add maybe the pedestrian access to that side too.
Never thought of it. That's absolutely fine too. Yeah, I mean, if anything, that north side has views. I'm not sure if we have any water views, but that north side has the views, and we have nothing that faces that because we're rotating our house. So, yeah, if you recommend having a side porch to kind of break up that, that would be absolutely fine with us. So.
I think that the idea of adding a side porch along that side would really break up the mass.
Okay.
It's part of reducing the mass. If I've got the nomination document for Canemah being getting National Register Historic Places status, and there's a section in here that I will read directly from it, and it says, "There's a retaining wall of large, uncut, unmortared basalt measuring 3 to 4 feet on a side under ivy on 4th Avenue between Ganong Street and Miller Street. Lore has it that the judge's house was above the wall and that the stones worship ballast." This is out of our document, why Canemah is a National Register Historic Place.
Okay, thanks, Paul. That was all the questions that I had. If none of the other board members have questions, we'll move into the other public comments. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first public comment we have is from Linda Basinger. If you could come up, state your name and city of residence, and you'll have up to 3 minutes.
I am Linda Basinger, and I live in Canemah area. The retaining walls are all over Canemah due to the slope, and the walls age and offer character when they're landscaped. That's part of Canemah. It's a lovely part. I think we all enjoy that. The massing, the tree preservation and landscaping will break up any massing on this home. And remember that this home will not be seen from the street because you've got that wall, you're just looking up from that. And I recommend that the HRB move ahead with the plans for the 306 4th Avenue. A lot of effort's been put into this to expand this on behalf of the current owners, and they're very willing to work and do with what needs to be done to make this another great home in Canemah. And this doesn't have anything to do with it, but Grant, how many trick-or-treaters do you have in Canemah? I've lived there for 25 years, I've only had one who wasn't a relative. Do you get
Not as many as
trick-or-treaters
we'd
up
like.
there?
We've had a couple.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next public comment is Ron Bisline.
Thank you, Grant. Ron Beislein. I have two roles this evening. I am the liaison for the steering committee for the Neighborhood Association meeting, so I will not take 5 minutes. I'll just say that we have not met as a neighborhood association since this submission has been entered. But if we do continuance this to the next meeting, we do have a meeting scheduled September 17th, and it will be brought before the Neighborhood Association meeting. We did have a steering committee meeting a few weeks ago, and all the steering committee was had very good things to say about the house and the new design and dropping the house down to the slower height of only 4 to 5 feet instead of 10 feet. So the steering committee is on board with it, but we will have, again, a statement if it's continuance till next meeting from the Neighborhood Association. That's all I'll say about the Neighborhood Association meeting. Personally, I'm Ron Beislein. I live at 712 4th Avenue. I've gone through the Neighborhood Association multiple times for different projects and different areas of the neighborhood. This lot is challenging, as you know. And one thing people always ask me in the Neighborhood Association meetings, how come people don't go get the geotech and all that work done before they come before the board? The problem is the board determines what the house is going to look like, the footprint, before the geotech can take over, because they can't understand where they're going to put footings and houses and the slope of the property. So it's really a catch-22. So pretty much in Canemah, if you don't have a flat lot, which there's not very many left, you're going to be before the board more than once. Once to get a plan approval, and then again, after you sit down with the geotech engineers, the civil engineers, and the city engineers to go through the plans. That is very time consuming, very expensive, and the people that are bringing this house to us today have spent many hours, and I know painful hours, trying to figure out what to do for a piece of property that they want to build on. And I believe that they've done a very good job of pushing the garages back into the house. Great idea. You will not be able to see those from the height down on 4th Avenue. They plan on keeping that wall there, which is historical. I did have a question, Grant, about your comment about walkways from 4th Avenue. The last two homes approved through HRB did not have those stipulations in them. So is that something new? Or is that something that is a recommendation by you?
That's not in the design guidelines specifically. Okay. And I guess just personally, one thing that I've looked for is whether there's easy pedestrian access to the house.
Okay, I just want to know, because I know the last two that have been approved do not have those things in. They have to get there through the driveway. Thank you for that clarification. The trees taken out, those are very mature trees on that property. There were going to be like 11, I think 12 taken out. He's down to 8, which I think is good. And with those large trees, with the ivy being cut off them, they'll be saved. And he's already cut a lot of ivy off. When you see the trees, you don't really see the trees because the ivy's still there. That's going to fall off. I think the deck moving down to only 5 steps, I think 6 steps off the deck instead of before I think was like 15, and bringing the house down is very good in 2 reasons. One is the driveway access will be at a grade at only about 15 to 17%. And some of the roads in Canemah are higher than that in grade percent, but that will not be as steep as they need to be. Plus, it also allows them to lower the house that 5 feet. So I think those are good plans. I think he's very well and willing to make change to whatever you'd like to see to build a house in Canemah. He just needs your help in understanding how to do it more readily and speedily, so we don't have to drag on longer. So the points that you've come apart tonight, I know he will take back and look at the plans.
I think you're about out of time, so if you can.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ron. Okay, those were the only 2 public comment cards I had. Any other public comments? Okay, and then back to the applicant, if you had any rebuttal based on those public comments. If you do, you can come up. If not, that's okay too. No. All right, and one thing I did neglect to ask the first time around, so staff had indicated that they would like a 35-day.
Yeah, an extension of the 120-day deadline to December 31st, 2021.
Okay, on the extension on the 120-day deadline, is that acceptable, and are you okay with that? Okay, great. Okay, so I do think it sounds like we'll be continuing this application to September likely. So based on the commentary, I don't know if any of the board members have comments on what information specifically we would like to see or any changes to come back with September.
I would just like to see the draft plans as soon as they're available, so we can have a better idea.
Board Member Ferry?
I thought that every plan that Kelly had brought up previously was good. The tree plan, the grading plan. I don't have any additional plans.
Board Member Stobie?
I agree with the rest. I think what Kelly is asking for is appropriate. I can't think of anything that would be needed in addition to what she's asking.
Okay, and I guess from my perspective, any of the items that, the staff listed all the detail on the final grading and elevation I think will be important. And then any adjustments that you might be able to make to break up that side that's facing 4th Avenue on the north side, whether you might consider wrapping the porch around to break up that portion there or anything like that, along with any details on any screening you might do around the foundation there and plantings, how you might arrange that, I think would be helpful for us. Also, if you do make any further modifications that change the overall footprint or massing of the house, since that was a kind of a key item that was in the previous approval, to note that. And then, again, is my personal view, but anything that makes the sort of the 4th Avenue right away, the access a little more friendlier or more accessible to the community, that sort of thing, I think would be welcome from my perspective. Kelly, were there any items that we missed or didn't address that were questions from staff?
I don't think so. I think that provides a lot of good direction for staff and for the applicant. And I'll just add too that the pedestrian access is actually in the design guidelines. And so that you didn't make that up.
Oh, okay. Well, good.
It's there.
Okay, in that case, then we'll entertain a motion to continue.
I move to continue.
I'll second it.
Can you continue to date certain of September 28th, please?
September 28th.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
I'll call the roll. Board Member Stobie?
Aye.
Board Member Ferry?
Aye.
Board Member Egger?
Yes.
Chair Blythe?
Aye. And I'll just clarify that the public record is still open for additional public comments between now and the next meeting. Okay, moving on, we'll now move to what's marked as item number 1 in the agenda and open the record for Oregon City file number GLUA 2138 and HR 2116, historic review for solar panel installation on the Joseph and Bertha Kuerten house at 815 Monroe Street. I'll ask each historic review board member if they have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare, and then whether they visited the site and have noted any specific information. Board member Stobie.
I have no conflict, no ex parte contact, no bias, and I have visited the site and did not notice any additional findings that would.
Sorry. Board member Egger.
No, go ahead.
I have visited the site and have no conflicts.
Board member Ferry.
I've visited the site. I have no conflicts.
And I have no conflicts to declare, and I have also visited the site, but haven't noted anything. Does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the Historic Review Board members about these disclosures? Okay, and we'll turn it over to Ms. Reed for the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Blythe. So this is an application for an alteration to a designated structure in the McLoughlin district at 815 Monroe Street. Let's see. My clicker's not working again. So this property is in the R3.5 zoning district. This is a 1895 Queen Anne house in fair condition. Across the street is a church that is not designated, and directly next door there's a parking lot for the church, and then the house on the other side of the Kuerten house is also not designated. So this kind of stands on its own as a big old Queen Anne on Monroe Street, multi-gable house with a lot of really neat ornamental details. The applicant has proposed some solar panels on the roof of the home. Sorry, okay, are you controlling the I think I thought I was clicking and you were clicking too. Thanks.
I can take care of it for you.
Okay. Can you please do one more for me, please? Thanks. Sometimes staff can approve solar installations if they meet the HRB policy for solar panels. You don't have to read all of this, but these panels did not quite meet the policy, and so I wasn't able to approve them at a staff level, and that's why you are reviewing them today. The key parts of the policy here are that the panels are on secondary facades, and that they match the color of the roof. So these panels do meet some of the policies, but they don't meet those. Can you go to the next slide, please? A few of the roof planes here are proposed for panels. One's on the back. Those are not going to be visible from the street. Those I would be able to approve at a staff level. But the ones kind of closest to the top of the screen are visible from kind of the street and looking straight on at the house. And so I think, you know, those may be considered kind of primary facade panels. And then on the other side, you know, those are visible from the street as well. Now, the photograph on this slide is not of a rendering or anything. It is just an image from the solar company website, just to show you kind of what their installations look like typically, and what kind of panels they use. So they're flat against the roof, rectangular panels, and they're pretty low profile. Next slide, please. These two homes are the only examples that I know of panels that have been proposed and approved by the Historic Review Board. These are visible from the street. So these photographs are taken from the street. You can see that the panels are visible kind of on the side facades of these homes. The one on the right, the blue house that came before the board about 3 years ago, and the board approved panels on the secondary roof planes, not kind of the ones that frame the front entryway of that house, which is on the corner on the left side of that photo. So there's definitely precedent here for solar technology on some of these designated structures that is visible from the right-of-way, but not prominently visible. Next slide, please. So the placement, just for discussion purposes, I've labeled the roof planes A, B, C, and D, and then you can see in the photos which of those roof planes are visible from the street. So I took those photos from the other side of the street, the other side of Monroe Street. So none of the panels are on the very front roof gables. But as you can see, they are going to be visible from the right-of-way. Next slide, please. And I think the most prominent area is this roof plane A right here, where I think 3 panels are proposed. Next slide, please. So the guidance from National Park Service, I included a link in your agenda packet to a lot of great examples from the National Park Service of panels that have been found to meet the Secretary of Interior standards. So generally they're applied to allow solar equipment that's minimally visible and or on secondary portions of structures or sites. So this is an example here. You can kind of see in the on the top of this building, just to the right of the white gable, you can see those panels. So that this is an example of a project that was found to have met the Secretary of Interior standards. And part of the reason for that, you know, it's very context specific, and this building happens to have a lot going on the front facade. There's a lot of detail and items of interest. And the website talked about that actually making this situation more compatible, because the panels aren't extremely prominent when looking at the building. There's a lot of other things that catch your eye. Next slide, please. Comprehensive plan includes some interesting policies that can be conflicting many times as any land use item that comes that references the comprehensive plan tends to have some conflicting guidance. And here we have, you know, preserving historic structures in a state as close as possible to their original construction. And then also, on the other hand, enabling development to use alternative energy sources such as solar through appropriate design standards. So I think we have, there are a few different paths that the board can take here, and there's a balance that you kind of have to strike. Given that the solar technology is becoming more common, more affordable, and more critical as we try to adapt and fight climate change, I think that's a consideration the board can take. Next slide, please. So the findings here are that although the panels are visible from the street, they are visually and physically removed from the foremost architectural details on the house, including the front porch and the 3 front gables. The panels will not cover or destroy historical materials or features. They're designed to be removed without causing irreparable damage. And, but however, if the board does find that the panels will impact the historic integrity of the structure, I think that the roof plane A is probably the most prominent area where you might find that. So I would just recommend limiting the number of panels on roof plane A or avoiding that particular roof plane entirely. But again, I don't necessarily think that that location would necessarily affect the historic integrity of the structure. Next slide, please. So my recommended conditions of approval are that the applicant submit documentation showing the panels will be no more than 5 inches above the roof surface. The plans didn't quite show that dimension. That ground or wall mounted equipment should not obscure any architectural features or be installed in a manner that destroys the historic millwork or materials. And that the panel frames should be black and not using unfinished or shiny metal or visible parts. And I'm not sure if the panels that this company uses do have the shiny metal frames or not. So that might be something important to understand if that's possible with this company. Maybe the applicant can speak to that. And that's all I've got. Any questions for me?
Any questions for staff?
Yeah. In going out and just taking a look at the house and driving around the back along the other side and taking a look at the side view of the house from the parking lot side, but the front side, I really, roof surface A to me is probably the absolute most objective. I object to it probably more than anything because it comes up and I would not like to see it there. But I equally, B and C along the roof are, I think that they do detract. I think that they are highly visible. And I would love to see some type of, even a solar wall someplace that could be put there. I fully endorse solar, but this house and the location of it and the kind of the facade and the way, the appearance, it will alter a historic appearance in a manner that's changes it. And I don't think that that's really the direction we should be going. And it's just my opinion.
Thanks, Paul. Any other questions for staff?
No questions.
None.
Okay. In that case, then we'll go ahead and invite the applicant up, or I don't know if is online or. You could go ahead and state your names and place of residence, and you would have up to 15 minutes that you don't need to use at all.
Okay, Geneva Cook, and the representative from our solar company was supposed to be here, so I'm a little unprepared with the details of the actual panels, which they were supposed to present, but, and
I'm Tom Cook, your husband.
we've owned the house since we bought it from, I noticed in the description of this property that it was owned and built and down to Charles Wallstrom. And we actually bought from the estate. And the structure was very deteriorated when we bought it. It was falling down. And so we've done a lot to preserve it. As a history major, I really appreciate the historic structure of the house. That's why we bought it. And I also see the future for our kids being necessary to have things like solar energy. We cannot continue to burn coal and other things, and we as an individual need to make that responsibility. So I feel it's really necessary that we start looking at other alternatives, preferably things that are not going to damage the historic structures that we have. The panels that we have reviewed, unlike what I hear people saying, oh, they will just detract. When I was looking at the pictures, they are very similar to just roofing materials. They are matted, flat, they are flush to the roof. Those specs are in the information that Raven gave you. They're kind of, there's no metal shiny features. So they just kind of look like a darker patch of roofing. And with that slight alteration to the roofing plan, we are gaining solar energy for our home that is not dependent upon some other things. Our house is facing, it's a distinctive house, but we are facing in such a direction that most of the panels can be on what is not actually the front of the house. Because our house is kind of at a diagonal of the north, south, east, west, that means that the dominant panels will be on kind of the alley side or the back sides of our house. But we need to have enough to make it worthwhile to do. If you start cutting into and saying, well, we don't want this one or we don't want that one, then we're cutting into the plan that the engineers have set up that will maximize our energy. And that is important. So if we're just gonna do 10%, 20%, it's not worth doing. It has to be the complete project that the engineers have looked at, reviewed, looked at extensively and reviewed our property. So I think we need to have the plan as it is, has been presented, because I don't feel it detracts from the history. As a history major, part of the history of Oregon City that is so important is our falls and the power that came from PGE. It was, or the forerunner of PGE. They came through and they put current that lit our houses. Our house was built to have electricity in 1895. That's pretty significant because most of Chicago and New York did not have electricity. So what I want to preserve here is that history of Oregon City and saying we're moving forward into the future and keeping it. Another important thing, if we didn't have power to our houses, we can't light them. But we have these power lines and power poles that detract so much more from actually looking at the house. And somehow we know that we have to live with them. That is part of our life, that we have these power lines there. But The panels are much less intrusive into the historic structure than power lines. So I would submit that power and solar energy, being the future it is not going to detract from our house. And I would hope that you would consider the future of Oregon City in accepting this wonderful option to have solar energy as being more important than whether my one particular person's view of what a roof material looks like. Because I know my house was not built with the asphalt shingles it has right now. It was something totally different. So I'm not sure that the solar panels are going to be detractive necessarily from that structure. So, do you have anything more?
The point I'd like to make is I've looked at some of the solar installations around Oregon City, and the newer type, like what we're proposing, sits up and just is basically a dark secondary roof above it. You can see a space in there, but not very visible. You have to look for it. People aren't necessarily looking just at the roof. They look at the peaks coming out a little bit, but they look right past solar panels if they aren't really looking for them. Just as we look past the power lines and other things that we've put in, people learn to look at what they want to see. And if you're looking at the house and the features of it, you will see, you can look closely and say, yeah, there are solar panels there, but that's not what you're going to pick out. You're going to pick out the other structures of the house. It wasn't stated that the front area was originally a widow's walk out there. Someone had changed that a long time ago. If you look, you can see it. But that was changed before we bought the house, and that's changes that happen. I don't think this is a change that's going to detract from the house or detract from the actual physical beings of the Queen Anne house. It's going to be something that's kind of added on there. And it's not going to be something that you're really going to see. Most people walking by or driving by will not see it. I had to look hard when I had a couple of around the McLoughlin area that had some panels on them. And this one over here has a raised area and the panels are on there, but you don't really see it unless you're looking. And I don't think you'll see this unless you're looking. And that's the issue, is that we need to realize that it's there, people will see it, and then you'll start to ignore it. And after the first time you look at it, yeah, it's there. If it's brought up again, you'll see it, but you're not looking for that with the historic house. And you're not going to be studying that. It blends in well enough that you will not be seeing it.
Okay, thank you. Do any board members have any questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Paul.
You're saying that that you literally have to have every one of the panels that you show outlined and so A, B, and C, and D, whereas D has on the back side in a completely different plane of the roof has the most panels, and A is on a kind of an opposite plane of the roof and somewhat shadowed. And I'm trying to understand where they maximize their output. And it just seems to a degree inconsistent with my looking at it. I took and printed it out, and as I'm looking at it, it just, I don't want to me, the integrity of this house and the design, it's a very unique house with with significant dorms and just texture to the roof design that is unique. To me, you don't see a lot of them like this, and to maintain the integrity of it, and the roof and all of these dorms and everything are a significant part of the appearance and the design that's there. And to me, as much as I would like solar on the roof, or I just would love to see you maybe take that outbuilding on the backside or the other one that's behind your structure or someplace else, but somehow try to minimize the visual deterioration of an important design. Is kind of like taking part of the integrity of that design away. And it's a difficult sale to me to justify it.
May I speak to that?
Yes.
You just mentioned that it's for your visual integrity. Right there, you have made a decision that you do not want to see solar panels. I therefore say you need to make a decision that you are not going to allow any solar panels, and then you're going to block them. You said you'd like them. I don't think you do, because this is not an aesthetic thing. They are not ugly. I guess your definition of what a roof looks like and what you want to see on the roof is your definition. These are not detracting from the roof. In fact, they may make the roof look more like it would have when it was first built. This is not something where the solar panels are detracting. And if you don't have a degree in engineering to understand where the solar energy goes, I'm not sure that you're qualified to say, well, let's take them off of here and put it here, because you can't. The angles of the sun, the way it's collecting the energy, those are calculated out very minutely. It's very complicated for them to come up with this plan. It was difficult. There is a lot of time invested in it that we have invested. There's money. I would hope that we can do this solar energy. I think it is a part of our future, and I think that the community of Oregon City needs to be seen as moving forward and not blocking this, because it will come down to a view of whether or not we're going to allow it in general or whether we're going to stop it in general. And I think this house that we have is historic, and I do want to keep it, but I have to have the ability to live in it. Otherwise, it will fall down. And this is part of the decision that we need to make. I understand that there are people that maybe don't like solar energy, but I don't think that place should be made on a historical basis for our house. Our house is what it is, and we want to keep it that way.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
I just, when you buy a house that's a designated historic house, when you go into buying it, there is some degree of obligations, and it's almost like zoning or in this case, historic preservation of it. I have an 1880 house that I've restored. I've gone through every single thing that you could ever imagine. And it was my wife's great-grandmother's originally. And we bought it from Grandma.
Okay.
And so I've been there. I've looked at some of my roof to see where I could put it. And I know that if I put solar panels on my roof, it would destroy a significant part of the image of the house. And the right location is right where everybody sees it. And it's not like that I have been trying to
that is your opinion, but if we have met the specific rules of designation for this house. It is not destroying the look of this house. It is not doing that. Then by denying it, you're denying it on the basis of, oh, I just don't like it. Not by the basis of the rules that were set up and the laws that were set up and what the historical rules are saying about this house. We are meeting the qualifications. We are saying we're doing the very best we can. We are meeting the specs that have been given there.
Thanks. Any further questions, Paul? No? Or Ferry?
No questions.
Board Member Stobie?
No question.
Only question I had, I guess, is staff laid out the 3 draft conditions of approval. Do you have any concerns, comments, or perceive any issues with being able to meet those conditions?
None. Those were all in part of the discussion that we had made with our contractor, that those were all pieces and parts of that.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, then we'll move forward to the other public comments. The comment form I have is Denise Beasley. You can state your name and place of residence.
Good evening. I'm Denise Beasley. I live on 3rd and Madison in the beautiful blue house that you had the picture of. I already have solar panels and have gone through this process. We have lived there since 2017, and we've been friends with Tom and Geneva Cook since about 2000. I guess I should give you a full disclosure. I am the secretary for the McLoughlin Neighborhood Association, as well as the representative on the CIC. So it appears that the main issue from the staff report is Section A of the panels. And after looking at it several times, I think they would be minimally visible from Monroe or 9th Street. The main visibility is a small arc from the corner of 9th to the edge of the house. And you can see it pretty well going down 9th Street. You cannot really see it going up 9th Street. They're minimally visible. And that is the guidelines, is to be minimally visible from the front facade. The solar engineers have designed placement to receive the most sunlight and have the least visibility from the front. This follows the guidelines. I don't believe it will detract from the historic house. The solar panels will enhance the value of the house. They'll contribute to the power grid, and they will offset the need for more power needed for air conditioning due to the loss of the shade trees because of the ice storm. Again, solar power, I do not believe will detract from this beautiful house. It will protect and enhance it so it can be preserved for many more generations.
Thank you. Okay, and I did have a second comment from Geneva Cook, but that was you, right? So, okay. So that's the applicant. Any other public comments on this item? Okay, hearing none, if you have any rebuttals to that public comment? No, okay. All right, in that case, we can go ahead and close the public record on this item and move into deliberations. Any comments, Paul?
No. I unfortunately have to vote no on this because I just believe I spent some time in front of the house along the side. I really tried to take a look at it in a positive way, a proactive way, and I came to the conclusion that it would have an effect on the integrity of an important structure, and I don't think that it adds to its what we're trying to express. It kind of, it's a negative rather than a positive. And I know that the solar energy is something that I desperately agree with, but this is a case where I believe that some other alternative site or approach to panels might, that do not detract from the structure would be highly recommended, at least for me. But thank you.
Board Member Ferry?
I believe that alternative energies are the way forward. I don't think that it permanently alters the structure, the historic structure in any way. I don't think it covers up any historical detail. And I would be inclined to support the panel installation.
Board Member Stobie, any comments?
I'm in support of this. I look at this, I just like Paul, I mean, I stood in front of the house for a while, and, you know, after reading the staff report, roof plate A was my biggest concern, but after standing there and trying to visualize it, I don't see it detracting. And like others, I believe the solar power is the way forward. The engineers, the solar engineers have done what they can to maximize the efficiency and minimize the number of panels needed to maximize it. So I'm in support of this.
Okay, thanks, Ray. And I think for my view, I generally I'm in support of it too. I think that the applicant's done a good job of coming up with a design that suits the structure. The panels themselves are unobtrusive and don't interfere with any of the millwork or other important characteristics of the house that make it contributing. My view has never really been that the panels have to be fully hidden or invisible from view to be inconspicuous, and so I think these meet what they need to do. So I think based on the comments, we're maybe ready for a motion.
I move that we approve the installation of the solar panels with the conditions that Kelly set out about the non-shiny metal parts and the 5-inch off of the roof.
And I'll second that.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Board Member Edgar?
No.
Board Member Ferry?
Aye.
Board Member Stobie?
Aye.
Chair Blythe?
Aye. All right, motion passes. Congratulations. Okay. Now we'll move forward to item mark number 2 on the agenda. And we will open the record for Oregon City File GLUA 2139 and HR 2117, historic review for new construction of a single dwelling on a historic landmark site, the Rasmussen-Hadley House at 412 Logus Street. I'll ask each historic review board member if they have had any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare. And second, whether they have visited the site and have any information to note. Board Member Stobie.
No conflict, no contact or ex parte contact, and yes, I have visited the site, but nothing to add.
Thank you. Board Member Edgar.
No contact, have visited the site and have no problems.
Board Member Ferry.
No ex parte contact, and I have not visited the site since from the design review.
And I have no conflicts to declare. I have visited the site, but don't have anything to note. Does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the Historic Review Board members about these disclosures? Okay, we'll go ahead and commence with the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Blythe. This is historic review for new construction on a landmark property, 412 Logus Street. That's the address of the historic landmark structure. If the new home is built, it will have an address of 420 Logus, just for clarity's sake. See if my clicker's working this time. All right, thank you. Okay, so this property, this is in the Berkeley Hills neighborhood. It is not a historic district. It is sometimes identified as the old Elyville neighborhood. And this is a 10,000 square foot lot, 50 or 100 by 100 with two lots of record, two platted lots of record of 50 by 100 feet. The historic home, the Rasmussen house, is on, it's situated on one of the lots of record. So the second lot is just a big side yard on this property. And this is a owner builder carpenter's bungalow, 2-story, well, 1.5 story, pretty large home that sits well above the street, and is in kind of fair condition. And my understanding is that the owner wanted to sell off the side yard property to have some funds to invest in the historic structure. So the applicant has proposed a new, a fairly modest size 2-story home on the adjoining lot. You can see a site plan here. There's a 15-foot setback proposed from the shared property line with the historic home. And the house is proposed to be set back farther than the historic home, according to this plan. Footprint is fairly small, so there's, and the driveway access is actually off the alley in the back. The design guidelines, this is a different set of design guidelines than you're used to seeing. I think when we had design advice, we talked about using the design guidelines for new construction, and that was an error on my part. There's actually a separate section of the design guidelines document specifically for new construction on landmark sites outside of a district. So that's the set of design guidelines that that we're using here. And they're a little less specific about design details and styles than our design guidelines for new construction. We can talk a lot more about the architecture, but in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of speed this up, and then you can ask me any questions that you want. The property is the proposed house is kind of a folk Victorian. I think you identified it last time, Sabrina, folk Victorian style, kind of inspired by. And it has a mix of elements from homes in the vicinity. There are other Victorian or Queen Anne style homes in the area, a few different landmarks on Roosevelt Street and on Logus Street. And then a lot of the homes there are various ages and are not historic landmarks. So the key guidelines really here are the siting of the new house and interrelation to the historic home. So infill homes should be slightly smaller than and removed from the historic home, so not as to overpower it and kind of let it stand on its own in the context that it has had for 100 years. And so the setback here of 15 feet plus the about 10 plus feet that's existing of the setback of the historic home provides more than 25 feet distance in between the two homes. And because of the topography, it appears that the proposed house is going to be situated a bit lower and so it will be shorter than in appearance than the historic home, even though it is 2 stories. It's hard to tell exactly where that's going to fall, but based on the rendering, it looks like it's going to be shorter than that. Other guidelines are to use simple, well-proportioned forms and roof lines, to avoid excessive ornamentation, but then at the same time also avoid designing an overly plain building. So I have some conditions of approval that are recommended to try to address some of these guidelines. They won't result in any major changes to the house. But one of them has to do with the porch roof. We talked about during design advice last time that, I don't think I'm able to point at that, but that the top of the hip roof is a little narrow, and if you change the pitch of that hip roof, that you can widen that at the top thank you. Thanks, Jacob. To remove the spindle work, because it's a little bit conjectural and it's not present on any of the other Queen Anne homes in the area. And so that bit of detail is a little bit distracting. And to add corner trim, I think the applicant explained why they didn't want to use corner trim. I think either way is not going to make or break this house it's as being compatible, but I think that generally the lack of the corner trim might actually be more noticeable than the exclusion of it, or than the inclusion of it. I did want to point out the height, number of stories of the house, and kind of compare that to the area and to the historic home, and maybe get a little bit of direction from the board on that. So this house is 2 full stories. Most of the homes in the neighborhood, including the historic homes on Logus Street, are 1.5 story. And this roof pitch is 512, and the reason for that the applicant gave was to allow for solar panels on the back, which is, I think, facing the right direction for solar access. It sounded like during design advice, the board didn't have any major issues with the pitch of the roof being 512, but that combined with the height, I just wanted to point it out and get some direction on whether that height is compatible given the context of the area. It does appear that the house is going to be shorter than, not be taller than the historic home next to it. But again, I just wanted to, get a little clarity on whether this second story at the height it is compatible. In the past, the board has included conditions to reduce upper stories by maybe a foot, just to kind of keep it down a little bit and make it seem a little lower. I don't know what the impact would be on the interior plans of this house, and how that would affect everything, but that might be a consideration if the board thinks that this height is not compatible as proposed. That said, sorry about that. That said, there were 2 ways that the applicant could have gone about this. One is this way with, bringing the design to you with the historic overlay in place. The other approach to this could have been to request a reduction in the size of the landmark, which has been done on other properties. So reducing the historic overlay to just the historic lot, the one lot that the historic home is on, and then allowing the other lot to be developed outside of the historic review process, in which case the board would have no influence over the design of the home unless they had some foresight when they reduced the lot, reduced the overlay boundary to put some requirements on the future development of that other lot, which in the past has come in the form of requiring a certain setback and requiring, putting a maximum height on it. So, you know, the board is looking at more details, more design details in this approach. So I just want to make that clear that there were kind of two approaches here. So my recommended conditions of approval are to change the pitch of the hip roof, the porch roof, to change some of the window designs and types on the front, remove the porch scroll work, add the corner trim, make sure that the siding is smooth fiber cement or wood, and then kind of some of our standard conditions that you see all the time, that we should really turn into guidelines. But that is all I have for the board, and happy to answer questions.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Any questions for staff? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and invite the applicant to come up. You can state your name, place of residence, and you'll have up to 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure that we'll be able to put that over the broadcast if we did that.
Okay.
Cool.
Can I have one? I guess you need one too. Yeah, we ought to look at these.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
I'm Claudia Howell. I bought the property, and this is Bob Vetter. He designed the house. And I'm going to let him mostly talk because he knows more than I do.
I quote you on that. We've been friends for quite a while. In general, we have no problem with any of the conditions of approval. The pitch of the porch roof going from 5 and 12 to 4 and 12 will bring it down by 4 inches. So it's a minor change. Windows on the front, we can certainly change those. The porch scroll work, I thought it'd be cute, but if you want to exclude it, that's fine. The corner trim, the building across the street has mitered corners. I don't think anybody really noticed that. But we have no problem going to corner boards.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you make sure you speak into the mic?
Oh, I apologize. Let's see. Corner trim windows on the upper story shall be rectangular. That's fine. I mean, changing the windows in a minor way is easy to do. So, in general, we're happy with all of the recommendations for approval. What we can't support is changing the building to a 1.5 story. With this particular design and the second page of your, of the handout that I gave you, shows that the stair and bathroom is right across the front. And then the first page has that structural cross-section. The legal requirement for headroom at the top of the stairs, no part of the roof can be below 80 inches. So that's drawn in there. I drew in the 4-foot high, 5-foot high, 6-foot high, and 7-foot high exterior walls. Bring it down various roof pitches and so forth. So at the back, if we brought the exterior wall down to 6'8", which would make the headroom at the front stairs, we could do that. It would drop the entire house by about a foot or less. But beyond that, to turn the house into a 1.5 story, we would throw this design away and start from scratch.
I don't actually see how 1.5 story could be a 2-bedroom house because the sidewalls are so short.
Yeah. You end up with an A-frame on top of a box. Also, the house next door, the red house, must have been built in the 70s. It is, the second floor is 8 feet tall, covered in T111 siding, but it's still 8 feet tall. And we have lots of time left.
All right, very good. That's what I like to see. Any questions for the applicant?
I'm interested, could you drop the ceiling height in the first floor from?
No.
Okay.
If I wanted to do that, I'd buy a house in Canby.
No comment.
I like the outward appearance from the street. I think it looks nice. I would love to see it to be a 1.5 stories because that's, but I'm listening to very emphatic comments. And so, but I think the conditions of approval that's been laid out are excellent. And thank you, Kelly. That's enough for me.
Board Member Ferry?
I don't have any questions.
Board Member Stobie?
No questions.
Okay. My only question, it was actually the same as was Paul, is what was your thoughts on maybe having an 8-foot ceiling on the first floor instead of 9, but if that's, sounds like that's something that's important to you.
My client makes it non-negotiable, it sounds like. But this is a very small, modest house. It's slightly less than 1,000 square feet. So giving the first floor a little bit of volume adds character to the inside and the livability of the house. Again, it's a tiny, by modern standards, by the house that you talked about at length earlier, it's a tiny little retirement home. That's what we're building.
Okay. No, thanks. That's helpful. And I think, you know, the neighboring houses are, it's not strictly a 1.5 story. It's kind of like a 1 3/4, almost, you know, there is more there than that. So as long as the overall height is below, I think I'm okay with that.
It's only 24 feet tall, and the house directly across the street is a 1-story house. It
certainly smaller. What you get with a 1.5 story is a much steeper pitch, typically 8 and 12, 9 and 12, 10 and 12. And so you're ending up with something about the same size, I mean, the same ultimate height. We've designed this specifically for solar panels. That's the 5 and 12 roof. Just 6 weeks ago, I think it was, California passed a law that all new houses have to have solar panels on them. And for the last decade, you have to design all new houses to hold solar panels. So that was my training, and that's what this is. That's why the peak of the roof runs east-west and not north-south. We're trying to maximize solar potential, and in this particular case, you will never, ever, ever see the solar panels.
Very good. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. And then any other public comments on this application? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the record on this application and move into deliberations. Any comments from the board?
Nope.
No.
Ray, any comments?
No.
Yeah, and I don't really have any either. I think that it's a great application, and that staff did a great job with the conditions of approval.
I move for approval of HR 0017.
I second it.
And just to clarify, that's with staff's recommended.
With staff recommendations.
Yeah.
Procedural, yes, but no comments on the application. Yep.
Yes, please.
When you say approved by board, by what the staff said, does that mean the 1.5 story or the 2 story?
Only with that would be the enumerated conditions that are, on the screen right here. So not including
It's not including 1.5 stories.
Okay.
reducing the height.
Was there a motion and a second?
Yes, there
It
was.
was a second. Okay, sorry. Didn't catch that. Board Member Stobie?
Aye.
Board Member Edgar?
Aye.
Board Member Ferry?
Aye.
Chair Blythe?
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Congratulations. Okay. Before we move on to the next item, I just want to check, does anyone need a break or anything like that before?
No.
Bathroom? Okay. All right, then we'll move on to item number 4. And we will open the record for Oregon City File Number GLUA 2143, HR 2119, Historic Review for Alteration of a Designated Structure in the McLoughlin Conservation District, the I.O.O.F Hall, which I guess that's the International Order of Odd Fellows Hall at 602 7th Street. I'll ask each Historic Review Board member if they have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare. And then secondly, if they visit the site and have any information to note. Board Member Egger.
I have visited the site. I have no conflicts of interest in any way.
Board Member Ferry.
I have no conflicts or ex parte contact, and I have visited the site and I have nothing to note.
Board Member Stobie.
I have no conflicts, no ex parte contact, have visited the site, and nothing to add.
Okay, and I have no conflicts to note. I have visited the site but no additional information to add. Does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the Historic Review Board members about these disclosures? All right, hearing none, we'll commence with the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Blythe. This is a historic review for alteration to a designated structure in the McLoughlin district at 602 7th Street. This is the Oddfellows Hall. Can you change my slide, please? Thanks. At the corner of Washington and 7th, it's currently, it was built as the Oddfellows Hall in 1922, and currently commercial restaurant on the bottom floor, and the second story is vacant. Next slide, please. So that's a little bit older street view. It looks a little different right now because the business is operating. And the proposed changes are to the side facade near the back of the building on Washington Street. There is a side entry, an old kind of utility entrance garage door. The doors were replaced recently. That was approved at a staff level as meeting the Secretary of Interior standards. And then now the applicant also wants to add an awning over that rear entry and make some changes to the windows, side lights next to the doors, and add some lighting. So you can see the condition of, as of a couple of years ago, with the green doors. Those were replaced with the doors you see in the middle photo, with a row of transom windows to match the transom windows elsewhere on the building, and in the other man door that's just to the right of the garage doors. And you can see also this view from the sidewalk there. There's no cover over that entryway currently, and so the proposal is for an awning right there over the garage door. So here's the elevation drawing. You can see the side lights. So the tall, skinny windows on the very outside portion of the doorway. You can see in the photo with the green doors, those are kind of partially painted over, but they do have kind of a row of 4 rectangular windows in each side light, and they're painted over in black in the middle photo. So the applicant's drawing shows 2 versions of a replacement of those side lights, one with a full single window in the tall, skinny window on the left, and then the other option is retaining the row of 4 windows in that side light window. Goes on either side of that doorway. The awning that's proposed is a standing seam metal awning, black. That's an example on another building. And then here's the entry compared to the front entryway on 7th Street. The 7th Street entry does not have an awning, but it does have kind of this prominent entryway with some architectural detail. So the guidelines here are, the relevant guidelines that I pulled out for you are: 1, that deteriorated historic features will be repaired rather than replaced, and where they're beyond repair, the new design will match the old. And so I've recommended a condition of approval that the replacements, if those side light windows do have to be replaced because they are deteriorated, then that the new design matches the old and has the row of 4 instead of the single window. The second guideline there is that the new works will be compatible differentiated from the old and compatible with historic materials, features, size, scale, and proportion and massing to protect the integrity. So that kind of applies to the awning. The awning is really a modern design, so it's differentiated from the old. It's not trying to look like an old awning that was originally there, because we don't have any evidence there was an old awning there. Fabric awnings are typical as historic awnings, but this is kind of a modern one, and it's plain black. It's simple design, and so I think it can be found to not be affecting the integrity of the building. Again, I recommend the condition of approval to keep the row of 4 windows. And we just received some public comments just about an hour ago. So I've emailed them to Jacob, and he's going to pull them up on his screen so that you all can see them for the record. So is this the one from Jesse Buss first? Okay, so McLoughlin Neighborhood Association says that the element guidelines for awnings and canopies are that awnings with cloth appearance, like canvas shape, traditional rigid or collapsible form with balance or side panels. A metal awning does not meet the standard. They are quoting the design guidelines for new construction. The design guidelines for alterations to historic structures are the Secretary of Interior standards that I quoted earlier. So while this is a guideline in our document, it doesn't apply in this situation. The other parts of this email or letter talk about the 45 degrees, which is also a guideline for new construction, and then not allowed shiny plastic or coated awnings. Again, that's all from the design guidelines for new construction. The applicant also added that it's a matte, it's not shiny metal, it's matte, for the record. Can everyone read that? All the board members, or have you been able to? Okay. I didn't know if the font was big enough. So there's one more email that we received. Oh, I think it says the same thing. I think 2 people sent me the same thing. 2 people from M&A. So I think you've read it. The last part of the comment does say this elevation, meaning the Washington Street side of the building, is subservient to the main facade entrance on 7th. The entry should also be subservient and secondary to the main entrance. The lighting should also not detract but complement the historic lighting on the primary facade. So I think it's up to the board to decide whether the awning and the changes to the side entry make it too detailed and too prominent as to no longer be subservient to the front entry. I think that the awning is simple in design and it can serve that purpose. And I'm sure the applicant will respond in their presentation. Any questions for staff?
I have no questions.
No.
And there's someone on Zoom for this item. I don't have any comment forms.
Okay.
This person on Zoom named Jessica is?
Yes.
Here she is.
Yes, I am.
Okay, if you can go ahead and state your name, place of residence, and you'll have up to 15 minutes to elaborate on your application, that you don't need to use it all?
I'm sorry, are you talking to me, or is the applicant, I believe Ashley and Lynette are there, are they going to speak first?
Oh, sorry.
It sounds like they're deferring to you, Jessica.
Okay, thanks. I guess I would just say, so that we talked about a canvas awning for this. First of all, the whole idea is that they are remodeling and improving the entire building, and they're adding an elevator at this back entrance, and there's access to both the upper level and a finished basement now at this back level. So they're doing a lot to try to improve this whole entrance. This includes removing and replacing the sidewalk to provide an ADA compliant access into the building, and they would just like to provide some cover to that building. So those doors are wood doors. It would be nice to give them some protection and to help define and identify this as an entrance. We talked about a canvas awning, talked about how that might be seen as preferable by the neighborhood and the HRB, and they expressed, I think, a justifiable concern about the deterioration of a canvas awning, and they wanted something that would be more permanent and wouldn't be an ongoing maintenance issue, and quite honestly, with this west exposure, wouldn't be, looking really worn in, a couple of years. So we looked at this and we came up with, I think, the best option that we felt was a traditional, simple awning that would serve its purpose but not detract or be more prominent in the primary building elevation. I guess also in terms of the side lights, we had that discussion too, and Ashley might be able to address that a little bit more, but we did talk about the desire to maybe keep the mullions and the spacing of the window as a four unit as opposed to a single unit. But I think they felt that a single unit would give it a cleaner, more contemporary appearance and help just to identify this as a new part of this existing building. But I think that addresses everything. Oh, the lights, I think the lights were selected because they are compatible with the round globe. They match the lighting on the front of the building. They were simple. And again, help to identify this as an entrance to the building. Again, this will be the primary entrance for events once the upper floor is remodeled and the elevator is installed. I think that's it for me for right now.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions for the applicants?
Yes, thank you. When I look at the front of the building, I see the type of outline that was created, kind of raised cornice, a little, that comes out, about 6 or 8 inches or something. I don't know maybe it's a foot, I don't know. But it has a kind of a distinct kind of just enclosure of the building, which is kind of appropriate for that design. In downtown Oregon City, across from the barbershop, they pulled off all of the awnings to restore the historic facade of the building across the street. And to me, awnings are not the most desirable feature of a historic building. Not that I'm against them, but I would have rather seen something that was more in line with what is on the front of the building and the type of design and facade that is, to me, more appropriate than having an awning. But I think for the period. But I wish that there was some other choice. And I understand you're trying to protect the very beautiful doors, wood doors that are there from elements. And I sat on the Urban Renewal Commission long ago when a lot of money was allocated to that building by the Urban Renewal Commission. And I know that That's a long, long time ago, but boy, it's nice to see somebody in that wants to take ownership and make it into something better and make it a thriving location like it was, I know, many, many years ago as a Fredericks. And I just don't have a love affair with awnings. I'll be very candid with you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Paul. Yeah, sure. Just state your name, place of residence.
I'm Lynette Dobbins, and I live in Aurora, Oregon.
I'm Ashley Baldwin. I live in Canby.
This is actually 3 generations that have purchased this historic building. We're Native Oregonians, and we're very tied to the community, lots of parts of the state, actually. And we've owned historic buildings before in Corvallis and different places, Spokane. And this side of the building that we're talking about there, it's very flat. It's west facing. It gets a lot of weather. Originally, that entrance, as you can see, was a garage. It has not been used as a garage in many, many years, since the Fredericks hardware store was there. So it's going to be, the second floor is going to be turned back into an event center like it's been used for the last decade or so, couple decades. And there has been no elevator, no access for ADA. And so this entrance is going to be the ADA access to the second floor and the basement. And so with that coming in and out, we're actually have a proposal to redo the sidewalk because the actual entrance to that is quite high, and it has a weird lip on it because it has the old garage entrance and it's not safe. I think it's a huge liability at this point. So we're trying to improve that for safety, security. There's very little light there. There's actually one small light that's over the man door, which is the emergency exit from the second floor. And so it's, for us, this is more about safety and security and the comfort for people entering in and out in a wheelchair. So that is why we're doing the awning. There's no way to set it back. The front actually has 3 entrances. So the main entrance to the second floor is what we're in the pictures, and then it has 2 storefront entrances that both are set back and covered. The side of the building is very flat. It has some cornice, decorative cornice at the top, but there is really no way to set back that entrance like the front. So the only option we have is to cover it with an awning. I don't like awnings either.
I just want to add to your point too, that there is no decorative detail on that side of the building that would be covered by the awning.
And since it's the paint that we chose, it was already painted black when we purchased the building. We just repainted the entire building, actually to the historic color that was, I believe, originally from the pictures that we got from the Fredericks Gearing family. And so when you put that black awning on the black wall, you're really not even going to notice it.
Any follow-up? Any other questions?
No questions.
I have no questions. Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comments on this application? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the public record for further comment and move into deliberations.
I just would prefer something besides an awning, but I'm not going to stand in the way of these people making improvements the way they're making them. I thank you for investing and making some improvements that are critical to the city.
Board Member Ferry?
I would like to see Kelly's condition of the divided lights on the side windows. That would be nice, just keeping with the historic nature of the building. But other than that, I don't see any problem. Forward.
I agree with that. Board Member Stobie, any comments?
No, I think the condition of approval is appropriate. I support this.
Okay, thanks. The only thing I'll add is just based on the design guidelines and materials, I think that metal is a suitable material. It's, simple and traditional, particularly for this facade on the building. Anything more ornamental, I think, would actually be inappropriate because it is, a secondary side. And I think when, it talks about coated materials, the intent there is around plastic vinyl coating type things, not talking about metal. So I think standing seam metal is okay there in my mind, and is a nice, simple, clean design that should protect the structure.
If I may, I think that having a divided light on the side lights there is better than one large, long panel of glass. It's more appropriate for the period.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think that staff's recommended condition of approval is appropriate there. So.
Well, I would recommend approval with the conditions of approval laid out by staff.
I second that.
Board Member Stobie?
Aye.
Board Member Edgar?
Aye.
Board Member Ferry?
Aye.
Chair Blythe?
Aye. All right, congratulations, and thanks for your continued efforts to improve and protect the structure.
Thank you.
All right, that will close the public hearing portion of the agenda this evening. We'll move on to other business, which is the approval of 3 sets of draft minutes. We can probably consider these as one item. Does anybody have any corrections or additions to make?
No.
I actually, for one time, do have one small change. On the October 25th minutes, I saw that the votes are marked voting yes 3, but I think they were all 4-0 for what that matters.
All right, we can make that change.
But otherwise, I guess I would move to approve the 3 sets of minutes with that one correction.
I second.
Board Member Ferry?
Aye.
Board Member Stobie?
Aye.
Board Member Edgar?
Aye.
Chair Blythe?
Aye. Okay. And then moving on to communications. Have anything? Or?
Yeah, I have just a couple of things. We used our CLG grant funds to print and mail a copy of the Historic Property Owners Guide to everyone in the city who owns a historic structure. So you should have received one in the mail, hopefully, yes. So it was updated slightly, and we added the HRB policy list to the back of it, and then mailed it off. So good use of our CLG funds and a good reminder for new owners and existing owners, hopefully. I did get a lot of phone calls actually as a result, so it's helpful. People asking about the grants and things like that. Our new grant cycle started July, so we haven't had any takers yet, but I've talked to several folks who want to turn in some grant applications. And the rest of the CLG grant, that's Certified Local Government Grant funding that we get every 2 years, we were planning to use that to contribute to some of the comprehensive plan update, which is ongoing, and there are actually a series of summits planned for later this month in October. So I think it's on the 29th of September. There's a summit that has to do with culture and education, and so history and historic preservation we're lumped into that category of that summit, and then the other 3 summits are going to be other topic areas. But I will share that information with you so that you can attend if you would like to. It's all virtual. And let's see. So instead of funding the comprehensive plan work, because the timing didn't work out, we scrambled to get a consultant to write us up a memo on window replacements and new windows and new construction. So we hired, it's a preservation expert. Her name's Jessica Engeman, works for a firm in Portland that does restoration work and lots of, works on a lot of really high profile historic preservation projects all over the place, but it particularly in Portland, in the region. And so she's going to write up a memo to help staff and the public and the board members kind of better understand what to look for in new windows and new construction, and like what kind of products are out there and what we can expect, and then what we can't get out of a modern window. And then also replacement windows on historic structures, and how if someone is replacing a window, what exact documentation should we be requiring and kind of thinking about as we review that. So I think it'll be really helpful. And then in the future, if we get more funding, which we probably will, we can invite her to a work session so that after you kind of review the memo, if you want to have a discussion and talk about it, then we can have that opportunity. And we can pay her to kind of attend a work session with us. We just didn't have enough funding to include that this time around, but probably next year. So anyway, I'll share that memo with you when it's done. It's kind of going to be just a final draft until we have a work session probably next year.
Excellent.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Kelly. Any other?
Well, I would like to say that I took up Kelly on her suggestion to try to take this course put on by the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. And so I spent, 6 hours today, or plus, whatever it was, in taking courses. And I thought that they were very informative, and the people and the about 365 people like you and I and Kelly and everybody from around the nation were participants and contributing, and we're reviewing all of the comments and everything. I've got, after taking the course, I got a copy of it, and I sent the copies of the PowerPoints directly to Kelly. So they are something that if you want to take some time to look at them and share them, I thought that they were very, very informative, and the people were cared. You know, this is about a lot of people that are in this because they care about historic preservation. And a sundry of different subjects, like one right here, which was just on enforcement and violations of historic code. What do you do? And what are the pitfalls and the problems? And it was just, kind of like a wide open discussion of integrity associated with having guidelines and then backing them up, or having conditions of approval that are given and then backing them up. And so it covers a lot of stuff, and I would recommend everyone to take a look at it. And the other thing, Kelly, I really thank you for this. Would we have some ability to get more of these so when somebody buys a house like in Canemah, I would love to give them that, and then I have a copy of, I transcribed the guideline or the national nomination document for Canemah, and I have it in Word, so, and sometimes I reference it or I can scrape from it, but I would love to kind of put this inside of that and give it to somebody when they buy a house in Canemah, where they have an idea of why Canemah is important. And anyway, I hope that you have some extras of these.
Yeah, we got 300 extra copies for the future, yeah.
Terrific, thank you.
Very good. Anything else? Ray, anything?
Nothing.
Okay, well then we'll go ahead and adjourn at 9:52 p.m.